Hey everyone, how are you doing? Hope you're doing well. Today I've got something slightly different. I know lots of you have asked me how I make my patterns, and the other day I found some old footage of mine that actually shows exactly how I went about designing the pattern for this Plague Doctor mask. So that's footage from when I first moved back to Canada, so that's some number of years ago. But it does a pretty good job of showing how I design my patterns, or at least one way I design my patterns. I also found this bread tag necklace on the same day as I found that footage, which is funny because I'm wearing it in that video. So I put it on today as an act of remembrance of bread. If you've ever wanted to make your own patterns, I think you'll find this video useful. It's pretty straightforward, pretty hands-on, not a lot of complicatedness. It's just a bit of trial and error, guess and check, and you can make your own pattern. So let's roll the video. Alright, so this is me, 7 years younger, and I'm starting off by just grabbing some paper and crumpling it into a basic form. This part of the paper I want to have end up looking like the front of my face, sort of. At least the right size and shape. You'll see me switch types of tape here. I was using masking tape, but then I realized the other tape was cheaper, and so I continued with that because I'm cheap. You could use newspaper. Actually, newspaper even works a little bit better because it's a little bit softer and a little easier to shape. But I just had a big roll of brown paper, so that's what I was using. So I'm just adding layers here a bit at a time, getting it bigger and bigger until I feel like it's the size my face would be. Lots of tape, lots of paper, until you have the perfect head shape. Okay, so that's looking like a pretty good face front. Now I just need to make the nose. This is, of course, a big bird-like nose, not entirely unlike my nose, just a fair bit bigger. You might notice I'm looking to the side a lot while I'm doing this, and that's because I am also watching something on Netflix, because sometimes it gets a bit boring in my basement, just me and some brown paper and some tape, some Halloween candies, maybe a cup of tea. Okay, so the nose is starting to take shape pretty good. I'm going to grab a little bit more paper and smooth out that transition between the beak and the face. So yeah, wherever there's a spot that needs to be a little bigger, I'll just take a little bit of extra paper, scrunch it in there, and tape over top. Grab a rocket to keep me going. I don't know why, but I just love rockets. They're just little sugary discs of goodness. I guess I wasn't happy with the beak yet, so I've added some more paper on the beak to thicken up that beakiness. Some more paper on the nose, or maybe I decided not to use that paper. Instead, I'll add some more tape. You can kind of use your fingers to squeeze and form it into shape. Oh, there I am using that paper. Good job, don't waste the paper, Chris. A bit more paper on the nose, making it bigger. That's the cool thing about making a pattern this way, is you can actually see how it's going to look as you're going, so you can add more if it doesn't look right, or subtract, or just burn the whole thing if it looks horrible. Oh wow, look at those fingers go. That must be from all my piano lessons when I was a kid. Fast fingers. Little bit of extra forming there, and that looks pretty much done, I think. Maybe just draw an eye on there, even though that's going to get covered up, so I'm not sure why I drew it on, just to get the vibe of the thing. Okay, here's a fun part. Grabbing some cling wrap and wrapping it around the model. Of course, trying to keep as much of the contours as possible, but just getting the whole thing covered in a nice coating of cling wrap. That's a pretty easy job. Okay, once everything's covered in cling wrap, I've got some duct tape. I actually think I borrowed it from my son without him knowing. Thanks, Sam. I'm ripping short pieces of duct tape and covering over all the cling wrap. The reason I'm keeping the pieces of duct tape short is I don't want to end up with wrinkles in the duct tape, and if you try and go around a compound curve with the duct tape, you're going to end up getting wrinkles, so that's why they're short. And of course you'll notice I'm overlapping them so it all sticks together to make one piece in the end. So duct tape works pretty good for this. I also like to use brown packing tape. It's slightly different, it doesn't have any stretch to it at all. And it's also easy to draw on with, say, whiteboard markers and then be able to erase it, whereas duct tape, it'll stain it and it's pretty hard to erase. So It just depends what tape I have lying around at the time, pretty much. You can see at the end of the nose here, I'm not using the full width of the duct tape strip. I'm making smaller strips so I can get around those contours and not have it all wrinkly. Alright, so now I'm drawing a line straight down the center of my mask because I want to be able to mirror the pattern pieces when I'm done. I'm actually going to design two separate patterns, one on each side of the mask, so I have two options I can go with when I make the mask pattern, and I can just choose to use whichever one is awesomer. The main thing when drawing these lines is I need to consider how each piece is going to be able to be flattened out, because my goal is to eventually make them all into flat pattern pieces. At this point, it looks like I've just drawn a very basic design on that side. I guess I'll have to come back and figure out the extra cut lines so I can flatten those pieces out after. And now I'm drawing the design on the other side, which, as I said before, is going to be a different design, just so I can try a bit of a different style and see which one I like better. If you have made my Plague Doctor pattern, you'll know which side ended up being my favorite, I guess. Okay, so then I'll go over my kind of sketchy pen marks with a single black line, so I know exactly where I'm going to be cutting when it comes time to cut this all apart. Oh yeah, and I realized here that if I wanted to mirror the pattern, I would need a line down the center of the bottom as well. Okay, so here's a really important part that I do sometimes forget and then regret it. I'm going to add little marks all along each of those lines. That way, once it's all cut apart, I'm able to put it back together and get things lined up again. If it's a really complicated pattern, I will label those marks just to make sure that I'm not trying to line up the wrong things with the wrong things. I know it seems like it would be pretty obvious where everything goes, but once it's all cut apart, it's amazing how easy it is to make a mistake. You can see I'm making some short cut lines around the outside edge of that curve and then one by the eye there. That's again so that when I cut it out, hopefully I'll be able to flatten that piece down without a problem. Now I'll cut off the cling wrap and pop that duct tape mask off of the form. Look at that. That looks good. Now it's time to cut along those black lines. Oh, actually I'm going to cut out the eyes first just to make sure they're in the right spot for other people's eyes. Otherwise I have to change the pattern before I go anywhere. Okay, looks like I was happy with the eye position because here I am cutting out the second eye. Everything seems like it's going smoothly. And yeah, that looks pretty good. The eye holes could have been just a touch lower for my face, but because I have a small face, I'll leave them where they are. Label each piece with a number for future reference and cut them all out. You can see here that I didn't actually end up needing to cut on the cut line at the bottom of the eye there. Once it was cut out, it seemed to lay flat enough without needing that. Sometimes I'll make a cut and then realize I didn't need it, but that's easy to fix by just taping it back together again. And it looks like most of the pieces here lay pretty flat on the table, so that's fantastic for a starting point. Okay, so my next step is to trace each pattern piece onto a piece of paper. Of course, if you were doing this for your own foam pattern, you could just trace right from the tape pattern onto the foam and then cut out your foam from there and you'd be good to go. However, I'm going to scan mine into my computer, use a software program and trace all the parts. I use a graphics program called Affinity Designer. It's a great little program and it's not super expensive. And it's not a subscription you have to keep paying every month. That just drives me crazy. So yeah, that's pretty much how I start off making a pattern. Obviously, after I do this step and print out the pattern, I test it out and make sure that it actually still works and usually have to make some adjustments, but that is the basic vibe. Okay, I guess that's it. Hopefully that's a bit helpful if you ever find yourself in the situation where you're wanting to design your own pattern. Obviously, if you wanted to get a Plague Doctor mask pattern, you could also just buy one in my shop and it might save you a lot of hours of time. Or you could make one yourself. You get to choose. Thanks for watching. See ya. I'm a Plague Doctor.